Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
In general, some topics were discussed, but there's no like list or specific items. It was more taking things that currently are policy decisions that the Republicans had made and taking rules and codifying them in statute. So we feel strong about that. I mean, there's some things that we think, probably should have been codified already that weren't. So it's not going to be like groundbreaking territory. It's simply going to be just doubling down on the idea that, listen, we think this is so significant and important that it should be in statute.
Like what, though? Like what?
Well, probably photo ID is the one that really jumps out, where we feel strong about it. We think it's something that all the rules associated with that should be in statute. So that's probably the best example. Beyond that, some discussion about reconstituting some of the boards and the makeup of them to bring kind of equal representation.
What boards?
There's a whole list, it's as long as my arm, of things you could consider to say, we think there should be equal representation versus what was there before.
Would you consider the DNR board appointing the secretary?
No, I don't think DNR falls into that category.
What about?
And again, when I picked up the paper yesterday, I was like, I'm not sure why there's all this discussion about, we're trying to somehow undermine the new governor. That's not the case at all. I think there's some stuff that's going to be reasonable. We just talked about it in caucus a little bit. I think the caucus told me, yeah, go ahead, take a look if there's some stuff that should be adjusted. The one that really jumps out is WEDC, and I think it does because the way that it was originally put together, WEDC, there's not a lot of, there's no big guardrails there. And with Governor-elect Evers saying, he wants to abandon WEDC and put together the old Department of Commerce, that's a concern to me because we know what the impact that WEDC has statewide. So if there are some things we can do to adjust the appointments, the appointees of WEDC, we think it should be fair. And I think that's policy decisions that Republicans should make. And we'll see if Governor Walker is willing to sign that stuff. I have not talked to the governor at all about this.
What about scaling back rulemaking authority? You had talked on Belling yesterday about wanting to look at that. Where are you guys on that?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk to the chairs of both those committees, I think any review of the rulemaking process is appropriate at the beginning of any session. I don't think that's got anything to do with Tony Evers. It's got more to do with how the caucuses feel about rulemaking and whether or not it needs to be tweaked.
So you want to look at that next year and not in the lame duck? You said the beginning of any session.
No, I think kind of with the old group, that's the other thing. I've got a caucus right now that we'd be dealing with in the lame duck. I've got, Senator Hoekmeyer wasn't here today. Got to talk to her about some of this stuff. So it's still very tenuous. There's nothing in concrete. The discussion we had with the speaker this morning lasted for an hour, but after just describing that to the caucus, I think many people in that room today were like, yeah, let's take a look at it. Let's review this stuff and see if we shouldn't come in for one day in December and tweak some of this stuff.
So when you say it's not necessarily about Tony Evers, obviously you guys have been in the majority for quite some time.
Well, no, it's about the change. It's about a new governor.
What kind of message does that send to an incumbent governor about your willingness to work with him on anything?
Tony Evers is going to have the most powerful veto pen in the nation. The idea that he's not going to be able to keep the legislature in check, I think you'd be naive to think that. It's equal, balanced government, and we'll respect Tony Evers like we have any other governor, and we'll work with him. Tony left me a message. I didn't, he said we're going to reach out and probably set up a date to sit down and talk. That hasn't happened yet. I look forward to working with the governor-elect. on a lot of different things that I think there's some common area, so.
What are some
I-
examples, Senator? Some areas where you think you might be able to work with them and go down?
Opiate, extension of the HOPE agenda, anything related to that, a lot of stuff within law enforcement. I think at the end of the day, probably the bigger areas is going to be, we're going to have to visit K-12 education and work with the new governor, and probably transportation as well. So, I mean, there's some big sweeping areas and probably some other specific things that you'll find some common ground on.
So do you think Speaker Bush shouldn't have said that right away, a couple hours after his win, that we're going to try to limit the governor's power?
No, I mean, maybe the way that it came across or the way that it was reported probably looked a little uncomfortable, but no, I support what the speaker's been doing. He's been working on this a little bit longer than I have, certainly, so, and I think some of the stuff that he's come up with have been good ideas. So.
For the lame duck, have you and the speaker discussed anything affecting the governor's ability to appoint UW regions?
Nope, nothing related to the
Tony
regions.
Evers wants to put 1.4 billion into schools. How tough is it going to be to do something like that and pay for rising Medicaid costs and other things in the next budget? How much are you going to have to find new revenue?
I would never commit to that number. Certainly that's a long, drawn-out process, that budget, and, but we look forward to working with the Assembly to come up with a document that we think makes sense, and, probably work off a base. I'm not sure exactly, but seems like that's where you would go with Republican-controlled legislature and a Democrat governor.
What's your take on why Governor Walker fell short on Tuesday?
Kind of what I've been reading over the last couple of days is the WOW counties were 3% off from where they needed to be, and then absolutely more turnout both in Dane and in Milwaukee counties.
Tony Evers has also said he would like to repeal Act 10. Is that something that you would consider working with him on?
No, I don't see it. I don't think it's something you could even create any momentum for within a Republican legislature.
Scott, the purpose of this lame duck was supposed to be about Kimberly Clark. Are you guys still going to vote on that bill?
Yeah, we just talked about Kimberly Clark a little bit. We're pulling together a hearing for Tuesday in the Finance Committee, kind of be the full discussion about what the bill looks like and what the impact would be. I think there's there's just not a lot of information or accurate information about what the Assembly had already passed. I think it'll be a good review for everybody. And then I'll be reaching across the aisle to Senator Schilling to see where the Democrat votes are on the bill itself. And if the votes are there, then the Senate will convene the last week of November and take up the Kimberly Clark bill.
So do you envision two sessions then before the end of the year? Are we talking about a Kimberly Clark session and then a separate?
Yeah, we're talking about 2 days, right. The Senate would come in on its own probably that last week of November, and then the lame duck would be in early December is what we're talking about. I should call it the extraordinary session, not the lame duck session.
Any plans to take the pre-existing conditions bill?
Yeah, we just talked about, we had a good discussion in here, and I was glad some of our newly elected senators who had voted for pre-existing conditions over the Assembly, we kind of had a discussion about that. So I think there's obviously a ton of support for it. But there's a few senators that are still raising questions about the version the Assembly passed, whether or not you go with that or try and just graft something that's currently in the Affordable Health Care Act and use that. So I think there's a few questions raised even today that some of the members need a little bit more information before they can figure out what you would support or how you would vote on something like that.
Would you support the exact same language in Obamacare, which Governor Walker said over the campaign trail?
I'm not ready to commit to that. I think, I want to see kind of if the Assembly version that they passed would have enough impact to kind of, if the lawsuit falls apart, I'm expecting that the new Attorney General will probably withdraw from the lawsuit. I don't know what effect, if any, that has on anything. So I think there's still some questions that can be raised in and around that. So, yeah.
Do you anticipate any changes to committee structures or to joint finance makeup?
Well, obviously, I have one vacancy to fill, but standing committees, yeah, we just had a good discussion about it. One of the huge adjustments, I think, for some of the members of the Assembly that make their way over to the Senate is the scope of the standing committees and how many different areas they have. Big decisions have to be made on chairing the Health Committee as well, obviously. Senator Vukmir moving on. So, yeah, we just started that discussion.
How
So,
about joint finance, are you making any changes other than filling Senator Vukmir's seat?
no, Senator Darling will be the co-chair of the Finance Committee on the Senate side.
Do you think we're going to start seeing more gridlock with a Democratic governor now?
Been around long enough to know it slows down the process. I mean, you know, the idea that you're going to pass, 1,200 bills and send them over to Governor Evers, it's just not the way the process works when you've got a Republican-controlled legislature and a Democrat governor. But like I said earlier, I mean, as you work through the budget, as you work through individual pieces of legislation, I think there's a lot of common ground that can be gained, and, you know, we'll sit down and work with the new governor. So.
Do you think you could work with the new governor to pass some of the tax credit legislation that Governor Walker was touting on the campaign trail?
Yeah, I wouldn't rule it out, and I know he made some pretty significant campaign promises, 10% tax cuts for anyone under 100,000. I mean, those are significant promises. We'll see kind of what the governor-elect does with that now that he's actually going to be in office. So, anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.